what's going on, how's it hanging? How's it happening? You guys know who this is. Kevin from the Chord Progression Podcast. The podcast inspiring young rock and metal fans to discover new music, find a place where they can connect and feel accepted. That is what we are. So welcome to the show once again, everybody. And this one, we go in deep with how in time, in life, people change. Artists change, and how that is a reflection of our lives going forward and how everyone goes through that journey, and just really getting deep in music and find the connection within that change, not only within artists, but within ourselves as well. So before we jump in, I want to thank support for this podcast, which comes from Phoenix Fitness. So you guys know my two favorite things in the world, podcasting like this and jumping into mosh pits and going nuts. So I got to make sure I got to mosh my way, and I call it being Mosh Pit Fit. So that means I need to make sure that I can go from the beginning of the first band to the end of the headliner and not have any breaks in between and just go nuts the entire time, but also have the strength to deliver those hits and be strong enough because, hey man, sometimes some people are going to try and mess you up, and that might happen. So you just got to be ready for it, and you got to be strong enough. So I'm in the gym consistently, weightlifting a lot and doing a lot of cardio to make sure I can stay mosh pit fit and hit my fitness goals. And you might want to hit your fitness goals as well. But you need to also prepare and recover right in order to achieve those goals. And that's where Phoenix Fitness comes in. They have many types of supplements to help you achieve those goals in preparation and recovery, such as different types of pre-workout, both sim and sim-free. I use their sim-free stuff because, guys, do I need any more energy than I have already? I don't. I think we're good here. So I use their sim-free stuff. Different types of BCAA recovery compounds to help you absorb nutrients in your muscles post-workout. Different types of creatine to help you build muscle. Different types of protein, whey-based, collagen-based, plant-based protein. I use their whey-based chocolate malt flavor because that's just what I like. That's what I go with. So yeah, different types of multivitamins and literally anything you might need to achieve your fitness goals, Phoenix Fitness has for you. So our listeners and viewers on YouTube can get 20% off using code CVB20 at fnxfit.com, link description of the podcast. Thank you, Phoenix Fitness. Now time for a feature presentation. We recorded this episode literally hours before this band's new EP dropped. It's out for you guys. Check out now and get into it right after this interview. So please welcome Brandon from the band Hostile Array to the podcast. So are you guys ready? Let's go! Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of the Chord Progression Podcast. This one is very interesting because by the time this episode released, by the time you hear this, this band's brand new EP, Trauma, will be out as of this moment. But when we're recording this, we are literally hours away from that release. So this is something I've never experienced before. It is so dang cool, and we're going to go into it. And if you like post-hardcore music that takes inspiration from that early 2000s post-hardcore sound, has some pop-centric, flair thrown in there, I feel like you're going to like this one because I did. So please welcome Brendan from the band Hostile Array to the podcast. So Brendan, welcome to the Chord Progression Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being on, man. I mean, like I asked you this beforehand, but now we're recording. Couple hours that were right before that release, man. How are you feeling?
It feels good to finally have everything out and together. Like anyone who's actually followed us for a minute probably already knows that like some of the songs have already been out that are on the EP as like singles. But I mean, obviously in today's streaming world, getting eyes on each individual song is a lot harder than it used to be, right? So I always refer to it as like a waterfall release. So finally getting to wrap that up is a great feeling, and able to honestly just kind of mentally focus on the next thing because I'm always trying to write new stuff. So.
And I can understand that mental capacity and the mental feelings that you're going through, just because if you're working on something for so long and it's done and now you're just waiting for that release day to hit, it's just like, come on, we got to get there, because we've been working on this stuff for so long. You've been sitting on some of this stuff for so long as well. And it's like you just finally want it to be out there. And we kind of talking about that waterfall. It's like, finally by the time when it releases, it's going to be like the EP got packaged into a barrel and thrown off Niagara Falls. And now it's like, woohoo, it's out into the world. And hopefully it's the same as the people that, go in barrels in Niagara Falls and then, survive the fall in Niagara Falls.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, it's nice to actually have this because like I have a really hard time focusing on the next thing until something is already either like set to release or be released. So like I'll actually get like a writer's block if like I have a bunch of songs queued up ready to go and they're just not out yet, because I'm like, I really like to take feedback from other people and really kind of sit on that before I start writing the next thing. Not necessarily because I want any external entity to have too much sway on my writing, but like I like to be able to grow based on the feedback that I get, whether it be from close friends or people that actually are, just checking out our music. So it's really hard for me to get into the zone. So it's nice to have that released finally.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's gonna be Brendan in the zone. Dun dun dun. Yeah. We're gonna get our own theme song for it. Or just have a show called Brendan in the Zone, right? And then all of a sudden just have the little graphic come on, Brendan in the Zone, and take the old ESPN da 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 da, or just reverse it and see what happens. Like da da da. You never know. Something weird like that might work. I've seen weird things work online in the past, so it could work. I don't know.
Oh, for sure.
All of a sudden, if you guys get a cease and desist letter from ESPN, then I am sorry about that one.
Hey man, this is your show, not mine. So if anyone's getting it, it's you.
Oh yeah, that's right. Shit. All right, Disney and whoever owns ESPN, yeah, I think it's Disney. Please don't send me that. I mean, if Ice Nine Kills can do their own Disney merch and you guys didn't send them a cease and desist letter, please don't send one my way.
Wasn't the whole reason they started doing that because they were like one of the few bands that were banned from playing Disney or something? Was that the whole story or something?
Yeah, so the story goes that they were supposed to play the House of Blues in Orlando in 2019, opening for Falling in Reverse. And because the House of Blues in Orlando is technically on Disney Springs property, so it's on Disney property, there's only like 12 bands that have ever been banned from playing at Disney, and Ice Nine Kills was based on their gory and horror-based imagery. So they had decided just to make some, I think it was 3 t-shirts. They made a Mickey as Freddy Krueger, they made a Goofy as Leatherface, then they made Donald Duck wearing a yellow, rain jacket with a balloon about to be eaten by Pennywise. Yeah. They made it, put it out there, and Disney never sent them anything. So then they did the release again in 2021, and then their Nightmare on the 9th for May of 2023, they did it again. So they've done it like 3 times.
I have a feeling Disney's lawyers probably know not to touch things under parody law, so they're probably safe.
They might be. So maybe, who knows, maybe we can start doing some crazy Disney parody stuff on here, and maybe if we can get away with it, we might get some more eyes on us. We might get some more people to check us out, and all of a sudden we're going to get Hostile Ray going on tour with Ice Nine Kills. It might happen. We don't know.
Hey, one can dream, right?
Well, one can absolutely dream. So kind of going into a little bit of a different aspect with this, thinking about, one can dream. So now, of course, with the EP being out there, what's one thing that you want to see with this EP? What's one dream you have with this EP? It seems like a really weird question to ask. It's like, it seems like a normal interview question. Why the hell did they even ask that? I never asked this stuff like this, but I'm just going with it anyway, so screw it. So, what's one hope that you have with this EP coming out, and what's one thing you want to see going forward with it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fair question. It's interesting because we're kind of selective and how often and how we approach playing shows. So we're most of us in the band have careers and everything outside of the music aspect. So honestly, having the ability to actually go out and hit the road with a larger artist, whether it be like a support for, I kind of think of like Tears, even if it was just like a C-level band in our genre or something, just having the opportunity to go out there and do our thing for a couple weeks on the road, that'd be amazing for us. Because like I said, we don't get to get out as much as we'd like. But that's kind of like my realistic goal. I know, big dream big, right? No, but I always like to set my expectations for realistic dreams and realistic goals. That way, it's like, okay, I can actually obtain this, and if I can obtain that, then maybe I can get to the next thing after that. Just keep stacking it on top.
Yeah, it's instead of just thinking, okay, what are you going to do with this EP when it comes out? It's like, well, we're going to go on tour with Bad Omens in 2024. We're going to open for them. It's like, okay. That might be a little bit on the unrealistic side at the moment. You never know. It could possibly happen. But it would be kind of cool to all this. I mean, I understand where you're coming from as well. I've talked to many other bands where, as growing up, you're trying to get these bands going, you're trying to get these other, and you're getting some traction, but in order to get that traction going, you need money. And how are you going to make money? A lot of members of the band, they're going to have other jobs. You're going to have careers you might be building on as time goes on. I recently had a conversation with the guys in Woe Is Me, and because they came back after 10 years off, and it was, Well, going out on the road, it's not as easy as it once was, just because after 10 years, these guys all have careers. These guys all have different responsibilities. So when they're going to go out, it's like they want to continue to go out, but they're going to be very selective of what they do because of that aspect behind it. So I understand where you're coming from your standpoint. But if something were to happen, let's just say, the Toronto EP over the next month or two, let's just say it blows up. Let's just say everything goes well with it. And all of a sudden, maybe, those C-tier bands in your genre want to pick you guys up and go on tour for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Or maybe a B-tier band wants to pick you guys up and go on tour for 4 or 5 weeks. I mean, wouldn't you want to potentially try and make something like that work and take that opportunity as it comes?
For sure. Well, and we're kind of in a lucky situation where most of the members in our band have fairly flexible jobs. Most of us work actually in tech for various government agencies because we're based out of Maryland, and so many jobs in this area are government based because we're so close to DC.
Makes sense.
So honestly, the flexibility, we would definitely take something like that. When I think of a dream tour, I think of the bands that inspired me to even start playing music that are still out there, bands like Under Oath and things like that. Hey, just let me grab even a few days of an opening slot on tour. That would be like a dream come true for me if I was really shooting for the stars. But but in a more realistic thing, I'm thinking to myself, a good example is an artist like Johnny Frank, who plays as Bill Murray, right? Seeing his career trajectory actually made me want to start seriously doing music again. Because I had played in bands for several years, doing DIY tours and stuff like that prior to this project ever really taking off. And hearing Johnny Frank kind of go on about how he didn't feel the obligation to go out there and just be a road warrior and put his music out online. And now he's I got to see him play a few months back at a club in DC, and it wasn't the biggest venue, but it was packed. It was sold out. I'm and the energy was just so good. I'm this is the kind of thing I realistically want to obtain, with my music career, just because I'm that's what really matters to me. Not so much as can I pay my bills with that? I don't need that to pay my bills. It's more of a passion project, if anything, at that point.
What kind of stands out to me, especially in that aspect and what you just said, going to see that Bill Murray show, it's not going to be in the most packed most largest venue and you can think of, but people are there and it's packed, and especially someone like Johnny is creating that moment where his music is reaching so many people and those people are so heavily connected to it, and the positivity that's radiating in that room night after night is just something that is on a different level. And with your music as well, if you're able to create something like that, and you might not be playing the biggest places in the world, but if you are absolutely happy with what you're doing at that point, there's no way that anyone can look at that and say you're not a success, because I always look at this, success is relative to happiness. If you are happy with where you are in life and what you're doing, because your priorities and what makes you happy and what you connect with is different from everybody else. What I'm doing right now, talking to you on a podcast, trying to make this be my biggest thing, this is what makes me happy. One of my good friends, he cuts metal and builds stuff for a living, and he's got a wife. They're expecting a kid at the end of the year, and he's one of the happiest people I know. Now, if we traded lives, would we be happy doing what each other is doing? Probably not, but we're happy with what we're doing right now. So I look at my friend, I'm I can't help but say the dude absolutely hit out of the park in life for what he wants. So you understanding what you want to do with this band and what's going to make you happy with it, and not have it be, we have to be the biggest band in the world. We have to be by the end of this, we have to be on Under Oath level at some point in time. But we just want to go out, play some shows, get people connected to the music, and just have a blast doing it. I mean, if you absolutely hit on that, then who's to say, you guys didn't work it, you guys didn't make it. You guys absolutely made it at that point.
Yeah, no, for sure. And honestly, for me, it's really just about how many people can I share this with, right? I get more excited. I know people get really bummed out about streaming royalties and everything, right? And streaming royalties aren't great objectively, right? I mean, you can make the whole argument that streaming kind of saved the music industry from completely dying because of the illegal downloads, but that's a whole nother debate. But at the same time, seeing people actively listen to the music I'm putting out, even though I know I'm not getting much coming back as a return monetarily, I'm like, that doesn't really matter to me, because I'm like, it matters that someone is actually listening and actually gives a shit about it. Like that makes my day, because I'm like, I don't need to worry about, how many, shows we play or how many streams we get or how much merch we sell to make sure ends meet. Right. And I'm lucky to be in that kind of position, honestly. So like it kind of lets me focus on what do I want to make and what do I think other people might be interested in hearing, than, what's going to potentially sell.
Again, that makes so much sense from your standpoint too. And you are definitely lucky to be in that position where just with what you've done in life, you're not really worried about making sure that the band is going to be that source of income where you're getting up on the streaming royalties, even though, it's like like 1/100th of a penny for a stream. It's just like the most ridiculous little minute piece of what you could possibly get for a stream, what you could make. And then just going out and having to play as many shows as possible and trying to constantly chase, different numbers, trying to chase different trends. You're just putting out the music that you really enjoy, that you really like, that you really connect with, that you really want to write, that's going to inspire you and potentially maybe inspire others as well. Create this connection, create this happiness within all these other people, and then go forward and just enjoy that. You're at a point in time in life where you can absolutely just kind of go off on this, do whatever you want with it, and really focusing on what's going to make me happy, what's going to keep that happiness for myself going. Because the happier that, like, if you're going to keep that happiness going, what's going to happen is whatever you're writing about in music, whatever your idea is, you're going to take that, run with it, and you're going to put the most amount of effort in there. You're going to put the most amount of quality that you want in there, and you're not going to be trying to like cut corners or chase trends. It's going to be just you unapologetically out there. It's going to be your art that we're connecting with. It's going to be you that we're connecting with. It's not going to be a specific like sound that's like, oh, this is popular now. Yay.
Right, exactly. And it's kind of a catch-22 with that as well, because I know some people probably have listened to our music prior to the stuff we're putting out now, and I would say that our music right now is a little bit more accessible than the things that we were playing when we first started. And I'm sure someone would probably be like, well, they're taking influence from these more mainstream artists. It's a sellout kind of thing and everything. And it's like, obviously we're not really selling out. I mean, but obviously it's helped somewhat to reach new people, but it's really just like, no, I like what I'm hearing out of this element, or I like what I'm hearing out of, this artist over here. And I kind of want to adopt some of that and try to make my own version of XYZ, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because like I guess my taste have kind of changed over the years. Like I still know very much that where I come from with the metalcore and post-hardcore scene, there's a lot of other styles of music now that have started appealing to me as I'm just kind of expanded my palette and not really caring what people think is cool at the time. I'm just like, what do I enjoy? And I feel like anyone that grew up in a local music scene knows that feeling of pressure to adapt their own art to what is popular in that scene or what their friends think is cool. And you can't really truly fully admit every single thing that you really like because it doesn't fit in that niche of your clique, right? So it's been freeing to kind of explore new sounds and just do whatever the hell we want.
Oh, and that makes a lot of sense too, because I think I forgot where I heard this. It was something I heard literally today, but it was something about we are all our own individual selves, but a lot of that individuality comes from the influences that we take. So when it comes to music, it's, bands that have their original sound that create this completely new and different sound. They're taking these bits and pieces of influences from all over the place and themselves conglomerating into one and putting it out there. And when you're seeing that change happen, especially I'm thinking about, rock and metal, I think about what happened last year. I think what happened in 2022 when Bad Omens released Death of Peace of Mind. And yeah, was it as heavy as some of their old stuff? No. Was there a lot of differentiation, a lot of diversity in their sound in there with different influences? Yes. Did it work? Did it work though? Well, a lot more people got into the band, and they're still Bad Omens. And then Sleep Token completely went and did this whole entire more, progressive melodic kind of style, and it's absolutely hitting off right now. It is going gangbusters for them. And it's like, okay, you're seeing this change, but a lot of that change might be happening because people's ideas change, people's motivations change, people's influences change as well. If I would have been a musician, I would have been making music in like 2015, 2016, it would have been like a mixture of like butt rock meets Rise Against. That's what it would have been like. But as time gone on, all of a sudden now if I'm making something, I'm like metalcore and post-hardcore, woo! But also Rise Against, woo! Like I'm still all like, there's influences change, the things that you're connecting with change. And if you're going to be making art and making music, you know, you're going to pick up on these certain nuances in the music that you're listening to, whether it's, you know, whether it's post-hardcore, whether it's metalcore, whether it's punk rock, whether it's deathcore, whether it's jazz even, whether it's country, whatever it might be, because there are certain instances that are happening there that you're picking up on that are absolutely creating this positive reception to your brain, whether it's something that's, you know, maybe has a negative emotion to it, but you're able to express it in a more positive way by using that piece of influence in your music. And then you put it in there and you might be creating something completely new, completely different. And it might absolutely hit. You never know. But that's what happens when bands kind of like, okay, you know, the sounds kind of change up a little bit. Of course, there are some that do chasing the trends. But a lot of times it's, as time goes on, we as people change. What we like changes. What our idea about life is changes. So we connect with different things at different points. And if you're an artist, you're going to express that in your art as time goes on.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think people forget that like people change and that's normal. Like not just, you know, not just how we view the world, but like our tastes and our influences are gonna adapt over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. And not everything is, you know, changing for the sake of like a cash grab, right? Like that's what a lot of art, the whole concept of like artists selling out, like why do you think that artists sell out? Because they changed their sound some, and not saying it doesn't happen every once in a while, you know, like it definitely happens in music industry, because at the end of the day, you know, the people that are doing it full time, it is a business. That's how they feed their families, themselves, their kids, you know, that's how they put food on the table. But not everyone that starts changing it up is solely doing it for cash grab.
Yeah, I remember in 2020 when Asking Alexandria released like A House on Fire, and it was another album that wasn't like, you know, not the American average. So it's like, okay, let's see what's going on here. And I remember reading this article and their guitarist was talking about, you know, how fans always want what it sounded like at those first two albums when they released Not the American Average, when they released the final episode, and why they're not making music like that anymore. And they said that was what, at that point in time, it was 2020, like that was like 10, 11 years ago when they were referencing this. And they said, as that time has gone on, we're not angsty, you know, angry 21-year-olds anymore. We're guys in our 30s. We have families. We have kids. Our worldview has changed. What we like has changed. What our style and what we are influenced by has changed, and that's being reflective in our music as well. Do we still enjoy the fact of the stuff that we made earlier on? They absolutely did, but what they're making now is going to be reflective of their mindset, of their influence, and their environment. It's going to come out in their art. And a lot of people are still like, oh man, they changed their sound for the worse. Well, it's because, well, according to that article, it's because that's what they're being influenced by right now. That's what their mindset is. People change from time to time. You know, I look at myself right now. I'm 28 years old. Am I the same person at 28 that I was at 18? Hell no. Hell
right.
No.
Exactly. Dude, I feel exactly the same way. Like I look back, and I've mentioned this before to some people, that looking at the music that I've created over the years is kind of like looking at a journal of like where I was at the time, but instead of being private, it's very much, you know, out there and open, right? So there's looking back on it, I'm like, man, this is wild, because I feel like I'm drastically different. Especially for someone like myself that like grew up in a very closed off and religious environment, right? And then coming to where I am now, it's like all my thoughts have just been out there over the years. Some of them make me cringe ridiculously, right? And then others I'm like, oh man, like that explains why I am the way I am now in this aspect. So it's crazy to look back on it. And like people, you know, need to realize that it's normal to change, and it's a good thing, hopefully for the better. Hopefully people are healthily changing. But
Yeah, hopefully it's for the better, but that is one cool piece that you're able to have is all the music you've made over the years. You're able to go and take a look back and see that like you said, a journal. It's like a record of you being able to see what you were feeling at that point in time because it is out there. The music is out there. You know what those lyrics mean to you. You know what you thought about when you were writing them. You know how it all connected with the music that was being written. So you're able to go back to those feelings, even if it's like, I wrote this 10 years ago and it's some of the cringiest shit you could possibly imagine. But I think about this. When I talked with Woe Was Me, they talked about, we wrote some stuff when we were 21 years old and now we have to sing it now. And they're sitting there thinking, we have to sing this shit. Like, I can't believe I actually wrote this. But at that time, that's what you were feeling. That's what you were thinking. So you were going to write based off of your experience and your emotion at that point in time. It's different when you're writing when you're 18. It's different when you're writing when you're 20. It's different when you're writing when you're late 30s. Even bands that are continuing to write in their 50s and 60s, the songs might sound somewhat like have a similar flow to them, but the style might be different based on the experiences that band is having and the influence that are coming in. I mean, you take a listen to the Foo Fighters now, they don't sound like they did when the Color and the Shape came out in 97. There's different sounds to it. There's similarities to it, but of course that sound is going to evolve over time based off of the experience that people have. Like you said, I'm going to keep saying it. People do change. Bands do change. It's a natural part of life. We all go through it just because with these acts and with these bands, we become so heavily emotionally invested in some of them at certain times because they mean so much to us at that point in time, where when we listen to new music, we remember what it was like to listen to them back when we were like 13 or 15 or 17. And we always want them to sound like that because we want to have that connection to it. But they're changing, we're changing, even though we might be so emotionally tied to it. When they put out something that doesn't necessarily sound like what we expected, then people get all mad and, off with their heads, they change their sound. Well, you change too. They change too. It just happens. Just because you are so heavily connected to that one sound doesn't mean the band has to stay in that one sound, because there might be people that are absolutely connecting with it on a larger scale now than they were 10 years ago.
Right. No, I totally agreed. For sure.
That was something I'm like, okay, I had a thought and I was just rolling with it to kind of bring it all up. And I'm like, man, because you kept saying, people change. Bands change. It's something that is completely lost, especially in the music scene, again, because we're so emotionally tied to some of those older sounds and those older songs that we want to have that emotional connection like we did back then. But a lot of times with artists, we're not going to have the same emotional connection we did to them, especially in more of our formative years, like when we're like 14, 15 years old.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, especially someone like myself who grew up with a lot of emo music and everything. Looking back on some of those lyrics, I'm like, oh man, I don't think you could write that song today, just because like some of it's just so problematic and we let things slide back then. How did you get away with even getting famous off of these lyrics? I'm not even gonna say any specific artist or anything, because I don't feel like it's fair to them, But it's just it is a thing, You look back and it's like, oh, this feels predatory, this feels wrong.
I can understand that too, because I know some bands that have, kind of looked back at their old lyrics and have said that too, especially from that emo scene. We're like, can't believe we actually said that back then, but we did. That it was the time. What else? I mean, as time goes on, again, they change as well. And I'm thinking about there's one band I have in my head where I'm like, their first two albums, man, I love those albums. I even love the third one was their best one. Ever since then, I'm just like, I'm completely leaving like the track on this one, but I even think about it too. I'm like, I'm not going to be one to complain about it just because these guys are getting older. They're changing. They're going through life differently. They have different influences now. Can I still go back and listen to the first three albums and just absolutely enjoy them every step of the way? Absolutely, right. I still can. And you can still go see them in concert, and you could go see some of those songs and have a blast with them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, it's been weird for me looking back at some of the I would say some of it was probably just straight up problematic. Some of the lyrics that I've even written, because the bands I played in before were, I always refer to them as ChristCore bands. Because growing up in a church environment and everything, it's like, what happens when youth group kids make bands, right? And they write about what they know, and like it's just so different from my beliefs now. I wouldn't consider myself to be like anti-religious or anything, but I'm definitely not subscribing to the same thoughts and opinions I had when I was a teenager or in my late teens or early teens. And it's like, man, like I thought that way. I had some weird perspectives of the world.
I literally just had this conversation right before you jumped on a different podcast, and it speaks to just the change that people go through. When you first wrote those lyrics and you first wrote those the ChristCore ones, you were going off of what you knew at the time and what was your experience in life up to that point. Now what you're writing compared to then is going to be much different because your experiences have changed, your ideas have changed, your thoughts have changed, your beliefs have changed based on your own experiences as well. And you brought up a band like Under Oath. I think about them. They were considered one of those Christian, metal bands as well. And then in 2018, when they released their album and On My Teeth came out, and Spencer yelled "fucking" literally like in the second line of the first verse, and everyone was up in arms from the Christian, like, "Oh my God, are they not Christian anymore?" Well, they change. Time goes on, life goes on. They get different perspectives. Their beliefs change. That's what happens.
Some of the memes about that were hysterical though. Just like saying that, like, sounds like a kid that just learned his first swear word kind of deal. Like, no hate at all. Like, I get it. I think people were just kind of really going with the contrast, of a band that was so not that, and now they're being, I think, more authentically themselves, because that's probably who they were for years and had to suppress it due to fear of alienating fans or people that they're close to. But it was pretty funny to see some of the reactions, and some of the reactions were over the top.
So some of them really were, because when that came out, that was really when I was trying to find my way, and like what I was gonna do in music, what I was gonna go with there, and really starting to open up to new stuff. So that was like the first real thing for Under Oath that I heard and saw, and I was like, "Ooh, this is fun!" And I saw everything that was going on. I'm like, "Oh my God, what the hell did I miss?"
Oh man. Yeah. Well, and I'm not surprised, coming from like the Christian music world and everything. Like, I feel like a lot of them do have to kind of almost live like a second life. Like, I remember one of the bigger shows I got to play back in my old band was one of the bigger Christian music festivals, Creation Fest, down in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Or up in Pennsylvania. I guess for me it's up. But like, sitting backstage with some of the bands and everything, it's just like the persona they're putting on stage for these kids that are buying their albums is not at all what they're actually like backstage. And that's not disparaging, who they are backstage, because I don't think any of them were like bad people or anything, that at least the ones that I was around. There's definitely some really shitty people in the Christian music world, but like, none of the people I encountered at that festival really were problematic that I had direct contact with. But it was just like they changed up their act a little bit to cater to a certain audience, and I thought that was interesting.
That is a little interesting, but I mean, and like you said, there's the majority of those people, if maybe not all those people, were genuinely good people. And it's just what they were presenting up on stage versus kind of what they were on the outside of the stage. Maybe it was a little bit different because of the type of music that they were making. Maybe, like, think about it from your standpoint, growing up in that and just starting out with that. Maybe that's all they knew. But of course, as time goes on, now they gain perspective, but maybe they're staying with that exact same sound, that exact same message. But as time goes on, they gain different perspective, they gain different experiences. So their personal lives might change. They might start acting different, but the pressure to act like that continually on stage and present that to that crowd might be so great, where you have to create that disparity between the two.
Oh, for sure. That's honestly one of the reasons I'm actually very happy I didn't find success. I found my own little pieces of success here and there, right? But like, what I would have considered success for my previous projects, like, looking back on it, I'm like, maybe it's a good thing that it didn't happen, because then I'm not held to those expectations or having to put a front on, because I got successful with this, and now if I do that, my livelihood's literally at stake, right? Like, that's got to be terrifying. It's like, okay, I made it big with this thing when I was 18 years old, and for the past 10 years I've been doing this. I don't necessarily think the same way anymore, but if I change this, what am I going to do? I didn't go to school, didn't have like,
yeah,
exactly. It's just that'd be a lot of pressure. So yeah, I'm grateful things turned out the way they did, actually. So grass isn't always greener.
The grass isn't always greener, but it seems like for you changing it up, it seemed like the grass was greener on that side because, again, it's just the way you're speaking, the way you're talking about your music, and the way, you're going about your experiences. You're just projecting from a place of your experiences have led to your happiness at this point, and that's where it's really driving it. So in this case, the grass was greener on the other side by going from where you started to where you are now. Again, the journey, the change, it happens. We're a human. Right. That's what happens.
Yep, totally right, man.
So I kind of want to jump a little bit more into the Trauma EP specifically to kind of see how this maybe comes into play. So when you were writing the Trauma EP, what was really the mindset behind this, especially going through and putting these songs in a collective of 5, especially how you order them? Because I think especially after going through it, how you guys order them from 1 to 5 makes these songs work so much better in congruency than just, if you're going to listen to them spattered here, spattered there. Of course, they're good songs. You can listen to them on one-off, but the experience of listening from top to bottom for this EP is absolutely fantastic.
I appreciate you saying that for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the title is kind of self-telling, right? Trauma, being, kind of focused on traumatic events and experiences. And I know all of us in our band have had our own struggles with traumatic things in our lives or mental health struggles, etc. For me, I always kind of get a little weird about getting into specifics because there's a lot of things there that are, I don't like putting everything about my personal life out there. It's like I already put a lot of my thoughts and opinions out there that, the exact context I kind of get a little reserved on. But I've had some interesting experiences with everything from family to, religion to, just a lot of various life's experiences that shaped a lot of negative things in my life, right? And after kind of going through several years of therapy, because I really started hitting mental lows and to the point where, it was scaring me, and I knew it was not positive for those around me. I knew it wasn't good for my friends, the family that I do have, and my wife as well. It's just like I'm not being the best version of myself because of all these things, and I'm letting past situations kind of dictate that. So after several years of therapy, this is kind of like me taking a lot of those negative emotions and putting them into I guess kind of like a first person perspective of how that feels for me, right? Things like our song Wounds is one that really kind of messes with me because, writing that, it's like, when you go through something traumatic, it feels like, it was so long ago, but it's still so present in your mind. And I think the lyrics really kind of reflect that. And then like closing out the EP, songs like Scars, it's like, it's a lot of difficulty, but at the same time, it's like, okay, how do I move forward? Right. So, and everything in between is kind of just describing individual feelings of what those mental health experiences look like.
Yeah, and open up on this EP as well, because especially from when I took a look at it, one thing I always do when I go through stuff like this is I listen to the music and I always like to try and pick out the meaning of the song and then really look through the song as well and see how the instrumentals really pick up on that meaning, how they drive the emotion, and how the vocals do every step in between. And when it was going through it, of course, starting out with Wounds, that's something I definitely did pick up on, where you're looking at a lot of different pieces of maybe of stuff that happened in the past that is traumatic, but could have happened a long time ago and just keeps coming back. And then going through Numb, going through I gotta make sure I get it right, going through Cult, and then going through Heavy, it kind of brings more of the Wound stuff together, but it kind of puts a little bit more in like these specific instances that a lot of people can still relate to. But then once you get to Scars, it's like, okay, now you're working on this stuff, you're working through stuff, you're learning how to understand what you went through, how to, work through that trauma and get past it. I recently had a conversation with Joey Arena from the band Outlier, and he brought up some of this stuff as well, where a lot of the stuff that he had gone through in life, there were things that he was doing, and it just, that trauma and just like the past, like he kept holding on to it. It's like, okay, I went through it. There's a lot of pain here. Why am I still holding on to this pain? What's the reason behind it? And like you said, going to therapy to really kind of understand this and work through some stuff, that's one thing he did as well, to try and find a way to drop off some of that pain. So being able to hear what he went through, hearing what your idea was, especially around the EP, and connecting everything together, especially with my thoughts on it and just kind of how I felt everything went, everything seems to be coming into place to really bring forward the powerful emotion of, there's a lot of people that have gone through stuff in life that has caused a traumatic experience, that does cause that trauma and that pain to come back. And whether it could be from many different aspects, whether it's something from family, whether it's friends, whether it's, past relationships, whether it's something that happened when you were in school, whether it's something that happened within a specific religious aspect, it could be anything. But it kind of brings forward that, we've all gone through stuff like this, and that pain can come back, but we can also find a way to work through that pain, go to therapy, find the help that we need so that we can understand that pain happened to us, and we can find a way to, that pain, like, because when it's trauma, that pain's always going to try and find a way to come back. But how to, in scars, in a way, it's like, we have the reminder that it happened, but have the reminder that we are so much better off now that we have gotten past it, and we have worked from it, so that it's like we can see where we were, we can see where we are now, and we can see how much more positive and how better off we are now. It's kind of like a reminder of what we had to go through to get to the place where we want to be today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and thinking about, like, for myself, I definitely struggled with this a decent bit, because it's like, well, why did I have to experience XYZ, right? Why did I have to go through this thing? But at the same time, it's like those experiences shape so heavily who you are, the good and the bad, right? So it's like, this thing that I might be self-conscious about, or this thing that I see negatively in myself, might be there, but at the same time, the things that I might actually like about myself, or feel positively about myself, I was also equally shaped by those experiences. So it's kind of hard to look at something and be like, I wish I didn't go through that, but at the same time, you are who you are because of it. So it's really weird to look at that. And I know sometimes, like, if you have really negative self view, right? Like, and I've struggled with that myself for sure. Sometimes that just feels overwhelming, right? But then when you have that upswing where it's like, okay, but like, this is positive, like, it's like a yin and yang almost, and it's never comfortable, but it's interesting nonetheless.
It absolutely is, and that's why, like, when I listen to stuff like you guys did on this EP, and listen to other songs that kind of bring out a lot of that similar emotion, what helps me with that is I think about my year 2017, because I look at that as the worst year of my entire life. But I also look at it as, had I not gone through all that, had I not gone through, learning that the idea I had for my life coming out of college was the worst possible thing for me, had I not gone through a breakup that absolutely mentally wrecked me, and I let that happen to myself, gone through depression, gone through suicidal thoughts and tendencies, if that had not happened and I'd not gotten on the other side, then I wouldn't have tried to find something for myself. I wouldn't have discovered, like, maybe I like music, maybe I'll try this, and I wouldn't be sitting on here talking to you on a podcast and just thinking about, man, I love doing this stuff. Like, this was what I found. This was it for me. Had I not gone through all of that, I wouldn't get to this point in time. Now, of course, before, when I was starting to work through all that and I was starting to find more positivity in life, trying to find something, was I thinking about that time frame as, oh, I wish I never went through this because I would be much happier if I didn't go through that? Yeah, I definitely was. But that, 6 years later, I'm able to kind of take a look back in the rear view and see, man, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have discovered this absolute love for music and love for, doing a podcast, talking to artists, connecting with them like this, and just going forward like this. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. If it didn't happen, who knows where I'd be right now? I don't know. I could be in a completely different life and not be happy about it, but just by playing it safe. And just, oh, well, I'm just here right now. Now I'm just doing something completely different than the norm, and I'm just like, damn, this is a lot of fun. So it's kind of, again, taking a look at the scar of that. I'm like, dang, it sucked to go through, but by going through it, it led me to the happiness I found today.
Exactly. Yeah. And it can be really hard to see that positive perspective when you're in the midst of it, right? Because everyone goes through shit, some people more than others, right? But I think that's why I'm so drawn to making this kind of music, so I can put my emotions out there and hopefully someone else can relate to it, because I know that like that's always been a good coping thing for me, is knowing that other people out there are experiencing similar things, and it's not, you're not the only person. It's like part of the human experience to an extent, right? And some things just absolutely shouldn't be part of the human experience, right? Some things we go through is just awful, right? But at the same time, no one's ever the only one. So like part of me making this is like it's equally selfish and also wanting to make a resource for people at the same time, right? Because it's therapeutic to get your own thoughts out there, and to talk to people and express these things through whatever medium it may be, right? For me, it's writing lyrics and writing music that goes with that, but whatever it may be, to get that out in the world, it's important to have that outlet, and realize that, hey, we can connect to other people that have gone through similar things.
Yeah, and by you creating this music as well, it's just the way that it's created too. You're helping people connect to you to understand that, like you said, other people are going through these things or have gone through these things. Because when I took a listen to the whole entire EP, again, it has that post-hardcore flavor, but at times I'm like, this is quite melodic. It's quite moving in that direction. But when it's an emotional topic like this, I'm thinking about the connotations of the melodic pacing at times, the way the guitars are working, the way the drums are working, the way everything's being pieced together to bring forward that emotion. So if you're trying to hit on that, when I listened to Wounds, it was like I knew exactly where you guys were going with this right away. Just by hearing the way the instrumentals were being put together in the first verse, I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly where this is going to go emotionally. Not know where it's going musically, but emotionally, I know the direction of this. I know where it's going to come from. And it's comforting knowing that other people have gone through similar things that you have gone through, and knowing that they have gone through them and have stuck it out, survived, and have thrived afterwards. It's comforting knowing that. And when you're able to relate to that in music, you're able to feel that emotional power of that piece, where you might be in this negative space now, but in the future, that positive space will come back and you will feel that. Music kind of gives you the guide to understand that that's going to happen, and that feeling is there. You can feel it in the music. You might not be feeling life right now, but for that period of time when you're listening to that song, or that period of time when you're at that live show, you're feeling it, and you know that you can do this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like having things like that to cope is great. It's that little bit of escapism, right? That helps us kind of pull ourselves out of some of the shittier times. I think it's important for everyone to have that. I know for me, music growing up was a great outlet for that, right? Especially just kind of digging into stuff where it's like, I no one really talked about like mental health stuff, especially 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like I feel like it's kind of been more of a modern, not a modern topic, but it's more common to talk about now, right? But like for me, that was like the only real resource. It's like, oh, hey, like there's other people out there that like are feeling this, and even if it wasn't the exact same message that they were trying to give, if I could read my own meaning into it, it still worked, right?
Yeah, and if that's kind of the beauty of music too, where if you're able to make music that is metaphorical enough, where of course you're going to write it maybe about something that is very specific to you, but if you're able to write it metaphorical enough where we're not going to connect to the exact thing that you went through, but we're going to connect to the emotion of the topic that you went through, the emotion of that event, then we can relate to it back to ourselves, understand where you're going from it, and then we can connect to the emotion in our heads. We can put our own like experiences in there and connect with it on a deeper level. But you're not making it so abstract enough to the point where we're not able to follow along and understand where that emotion is coming from. It's like you found that sweet spot where people can understand the emotion of what they're going through, but you made it metaphorical enough where they're able to put their own experiences into it when they're listening to that song, going through the emotional journey you're putting them on, and really feeling it and having it impact them in such a more deep way than, if it was something of you directly talking about everything that happened to you, because unless you went through that exact same thing, it's going to be a lot harder to connect with you on that aspect.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, that's something I'm a huge proponent of, because every time I think about music and every time I listen to it, it's the bands that find that balance between being metaphorical enough but not being too abstract to really guide us on that emotional journey really takes from. That's why I think Dave Grohl said it was like he can be playing in front of 85,000 people and 85,000 people be singing his songs back to him. And the reason why they're doing it and the reason why they're connected with that song is completely unique to each person. It's that kind of stuff that really makes it like impactful, and it makes you understand like, man, music can have such a positive impact on your life. And I even think about when I was going through my crap in 2017, how bad it was. I didn't really want to listen to Rise Against anymore because the girl I had dated, I met her at a Rise Against show.
Oh,
So
man.
and that's my favorite band. So I was like, okay, I really don't want to listen to this because those negative connotations kept coming back. I decided to go see him live just by myself. I was like, okay, we'll just see what happens. And for that hour and a half, I forgot anything bad was happening in my life. And at that point in time, after that show, I told myself, I feel like things are going to get worse for me, but at least I have them back. At least I have my favorite band back. At least I have that moment to like kind of like latch onto and hold on to. Oh man, it helped out so much.
Just making that reassociation with your brain so it didn't have to, be specifically in context of that relationship is huge for sure.
Yeah, and that's why it's like when it comes to live music, why I'm such a huge proponent of going to shows, even if it's, say you want to go see a band and it's like, okay, it's your favorite band, but I don't really want to go alone. I'm like, I'm always advocating people to go by themselves because everyone there at that show is going to be there because they are emotionally, positively connected with some band on that bill. And if the band's the headliner that you like, it's the majority of the people are going to be connecting with that band the positive way. It's like it's this emotional experience where you can have so much fun in that moment. You can just get lost in it and just really enjoy it. And then when that show is over, it's like, okay, you felt that positivity again. You felt that happiness again. And you connected with so many other people around you that just went through that exact same feeling that you did. It's kind of like communal healing in a way.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, hell, like I just a few nights ago, I went caught that package with Wage War and Nothing Nowhere and everything, and all of great artists, but I have a really specific connection to artists like Nothing Nowhere, because just lyrically, it really vibes with me. And already had been a long week, and everything. It didn't really matter what was going on earlier that day at work or, any of the negative things potentially going on in my life. It's like being at that show, it's like, oh, hey, like I can forget about that for the next, 30 to 45 minutes or an hour and just, vibe with it.
Yeah, I think about that because the week before we recorded this, I was as burnt out as all hell. I just mentally just didn't care, just physically done with everything. And then that Friday night, I'm like, you know what? I got tickets to go see a show. I'm gonna go see it and see what happens. And it was like a shot of adrenaline or a shot of energy just got sent right back into me. And I went to go see. It was Wargasm UK, Vended, and Bloodywood was headlining. And just the way the crowd reacted to Bloodywood, just everyone was so into it. And everyone was moving around like crazy, having a blast. It was just that positive energy shot that I absolutely needed. And I'm like, man, I am happy as all hell now. I'm ready to get back to going and doing my stuff. I'm remotivated once again. It's that kind of experience where you're just like, when people say music saves, it absolutely does. It absolutely does.
Yeah, and it can sound silly sometimes, right? Like there's like the memes and everything where people take it too far, but it really does have an emotional and psychological impact on you, right? And I think that's something that we can't really undermine. And it's not, music has a special connection that way for a lot of people. Maybe it's not music for some people. Some people, might be having an emotional connection with something else. And I don't know, whatever gets you out of that negative headspace is, in my opinion, a net positive.
That's a great way to put it. Whatever gets you out of that headspace is absolutely a net positive. It turns us into something where we can actually like look at life and like smile again. We can enjoy it again. We can just find the happiness that's in there and really just be open to the experience once again. Because I'm thinking about, going to all these shows. It was before I started going to shows by myself, I was like, oh no, I don't ever want to do this. This is weird. But now I'm just by going to shows by myself, I've met so many great people. I've become friends with so many great people. I've seen so many great bands. I've discovered so many new bands just by going and saying, you know what? I want to see this one band on this bill. They might be opening. Yeah, this band is headlining. I haven't seen them yet. Let's go check them out and see what happens. And then just, whoa. Just that positivity just gets you. And it's just, man, I feed off of it. It's crazy. And so then, of course, listening to the Trauma EP, just kind of be able to like listen to it in a different way and kind of contextualize everything once again to see for myself, like understand again the stuff I've gone through. Yeah, some of the stuff has sucked. Some of the stuff has been terrible. Some of the stuff does come back in my head. I'm thinking, man, that hurt. But then I listen to a song like Scars and I'm like, man, you know, I somehow got through all of that. And look at where I'm at today. And I look back at that no longer as a pain point, but I look back at that as a reminder of where I was to where I am now. And how, you know, if something else comes up, I take a look back at that point, thinking how bad it was. I'm like, nothing's going to be able to keep me down because that didn't keep me down. A couple of days of just feeling bad. Nah. I still got this. Just kind of maybe go back to music, revert to it. It's just like, ooh, this is good stuff.
I'm really happy to hear that, like that actually, that came through the way, because like really that's the way I wanted to intend it to be, you know, especially with closing off the EP with Scars, because like it still has, you know, a little bit of a painful tone, but a positive tone at the same time. And, you know, I think sometimes we forget that, like, you know, pain might not always go away, but there's a way to put a positive spin on it. You know, I've never been someone that's really good at writing positive lyrics by any means, because it's like, you know, music is my outlet to get a lot of negative shit out. But you know, for once I was kind of like, I want to make sure that like I'm able to at least show there's some positivity there and show growth there, because like growth is positive, right? Even if it's painful. So I'm really happy to hear that actually came across the way I intended.
Well, just one thing I do not want to, you know, let go before we close this out is listening to Scars, and especially when we got to the bridge. And all of a sudden I started hearing some heavier, unclean vocals coming there. That's the thing that got me the most excited on this EP. But it's the reason behind it, connecting with everything. Because when I listened to those, I was absolutely loving it, because it kind of showed that pain that you'd gone through, it can come back from time to time once again. But it comes through at this point in time as a reminder and a motivation to keep us going forward in life, to become who we want to be. Because again, we can see that pain has passed. The worst of it has passed. Yes, times there's gonna be times where that idea and that mindset, and sometimes, you know, their memories are gonna come flashing back, but we've got, like, you know that you've gotten past it. You know that because you went through that, you are maybe the happiest person you are today, and you can kind of put a positive spin on it as a reminder of you to be like, you know what, I was once here, but because of going through that and learning more about myself, understanding more about myself, and putting more investment in myself, I am at this point here where I'm much happier. So it kind of comes through as, you know what, this is all right. And then it just added a little more energy to the song too. And if I'm big about all, like, you know, I want to go mosh, I want to go energy. So I was like, oh boy, I want people to go smashy during this song. Yeah.
Love that. That's awesome.
All right, I got one more question before we head out, Brennan, and it's, once the EP comes out, of course, because by the time this episode releases, the EP will be out, because by the time we're recording this right now, we got about like 2 hours before it's about to come out to the rest of the world. So once it's out there, what is up next for Hostile Array? What do you guys got planned coming next? If it's shows, you know, I know you said you're working on more music after this, because now you got this EP finally out. Like, what's next on the agenda for Hostile Array in 2023?
So I think definitely doubling down on the writing and recording process for sure for the next thing, because I have to stay busy in that sense. Like I said, we don't play as many shows. We've got some things we got lined up for later in the year, but as far as like the writing process goes and everything, I'm already sitting on like 5 demos that I'm really excited about. So hopefully can get those refined and ready to record sooner rather than later. And I'm also excited because it's kind of, you know, we played around with sound a lot on this EP, and I think we kind of brought a little bit more of the slightly more aggressive roots from our first album back for some of the songs that we're writing right now. So I'm kind of interested to see how that marriage comes together of the sound that we've progressed to, and then picking certain aspects of our roots and bringing those together. So I'm excited for that.
Well, I'm gonna be excited for that as well, because as we talked about, people change, sound change, influences change, and you guys are working on, the sound you have now. Just continue to evolve with it, but then looking back at what you guys used to do, maybe, ooh, this will fit. Maybe we're connecting with this now for this piece. Let's see what we can use that in here. And you never know, you might end up getting something where you put out a song and it's like, oh my God, this is the best song of 2024. Holy shit! It could happen. It could happen.
Hey man, any especially in the TikTok days, man, anything can happen, right?
Anything can happen. If Baby Shark can become the most popular song in the world, I mean, anything can happen. It's possible. Well, Brendan, as we bring this podcast to its conclusion, one thing I'd like to do is give my guest, which is you in this instance, a chance to say whatever you want to say, plug whatever you want to plug, promote whatever you want to promote at the end of the podcast. So, my friend, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on again. And yeah, just find Trauma on whatever streaming service you like, and just put it on repeat, add it to your playlist. Just check it out. That's all we really care about. So
just check it out. Now it's time for this podcast with 1, 2, 3 very specific things. So first things first, the Trauma EP is going to be out by the time this episode releases, of course. I've said that a number of times. So you're going to want to go listen to it. There's a couple of music videos out for it. You're going to want to go watch. And when it comes to Hostile Ray, you're going to want to check out these guys live so you can get that experience that we were talking about, that positive experience of just, yeah. So what's the best way to do that? You're going to want to follow along with them on their socials so you know when this is happening. But how is the best way to go about that? Because I know you're going to want to look all this stuff up, but you're just going to say, hey, Kevin, can you just put this in one convenient place for us so we can just click the links we want and go from there? Absolutely. Go to the description of the podcast where it says find Hostile Ray online. There'll be links and labels for literally everything you need, social media-wise, YouTube-wise, where you can find them online, and, of course, where you can stream the Trauma EP. It's all going to be there for you. I'm doing all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is click and take it from there. Now it's time for number 2, Brandon. Whenever I'm guesting the podcast, I enjoy having the podcast. I tend to make a certain promise as a way to say, thank you for being on the podcast, and I would like to continue to support the band in any way I can. And this is how I like to do it. So my promise to you is going to be a when, not an if. If implies it might not happen. When implies this is going to happen. We just don't have a day or time yet. When I get to see you perform live for the first time, I'm going to channel my inner Liam Neeson from Taken, where I will look for you, I will find you, and I will come up to the merch table and say, hey, Brendan, first round's on me.
Love that. Love it.
Absolutely. And now it's time for number 3. I cannot in all good conscience end this podcast by saying goodbye because, hey, man, I made a promise to you, and this conversation was fantastic. So is this the only time I want you on the podcast? No, I want you on once more, twice more, 3 times more, wherever we can get you back on again in the future. So can this be goodbye? Nah, I don't want to speak goodbye. I want this to end by saying this. I'll see you later.
Yep, I'll see you then.
Well, folks, this is my interview with Brendan from the band Hostile Array. And now it's time for Kevin's final thought. I think the biggest thing we need to really take from this podcast is the concept of change. And we had talked about the concept of change in 2 different aspects on this one. The first aspect we talked about concept of change is from the artist perspective. And yes, talking to Brandon about it, what he grew up writing when he first started, man, that Christian core style versus what he's writing now and what he's going to write in the future, of course, is going to be different based off of his experiences, the experiences he had up until he was 15, until he was 21, until he was 28, whatever it might be. Those experiences and those influences over life, of course, have changed his perception, have changed his ideas, maybe have changed some of his beliefs and values. And going forward, of course, we all have had that happen to us as well. I am not the same person I was at 18 years old. If you're, 23, 22, 24, you are not the same person you were at 18 years old. If you're in your 30s and 40s, you're not the same person you were when you were 25. If you're 18 years old, you're not the same person you were when you were 13. People change because of their experiences, because of what they go through in life. It is a natural progression. And as bands continue to grow as well, more than likely their sound is going to have some sort of change to it. Take a look at Bad Omens. Yes, what they did with The Death of Peace of Mind in 2022 is not what they did on their self-titled debut in 2016. But you can still tell it's Bad Omens. That's the key there. So the thing is, just being open and accepting to that change from artists, because we go through those changes as well. And the second thing is just the change that happens between the stuff that you go through in life and, coming out the other end of it. We talked about pain, we talked about trauma, and we talked about how on the Trauma EP, how Brendan really explains a lot of that, especially in the first 4 songs. In that final song, Scars, how we take a look at that and find a way to make it into a positive for ourselves. I've done that myself with what I went through in 2017. Had I not gone through all that crap, had I not gone through learning that, me thinking I was going to work in a corporate job and just kind of go through life and just, do whatever, was not for me. I thought that was for me when I was 21 and 22, but right when I got to college, that was not it. I had a breakup that really wrecked me mentally because I let it wreck me mentally. And then depression and suicidal thoughts and tendencies did dip in. But if it wasn't for going through that and getting past that, I wouldn't have discovered that I needed to find something for myself to make me happy. And what made me happy was music, was going to concerts, finding out that I love going to mosh pits, and starting something for myself, which then turned into the Chord Progression Podcast. Taking a look at this episode right now, this is our 416th episode. I mean, not many podcasts get past like 10 or 20. We're at 416. And I really don't feel like stopping. I still get a lot of joy out of these. So I take a look at that and it's just like, man, that still sucked to go through, but I'm still rolling with it. And if you want to really embrace that and really get an understanding of that, make sure you check out Hostile Ray's EP Trauma, which is out now. Best way to get in line with Hostile Ray is to go to the description of the podcast, which is find Hostile Ray online. Links to their socials, YouTube, where you can stream their music, where you can visit them online and find live shows when they're going to be playing in your area. All in the description of the podcast, so go check that out. Make sure you also follow along with the Chord Progression Podcast. We're primarily on Facebook and Instagram, so you can get all the great content there, all the great short content, all the great stuff we're doing. You want to connect with us, you want to talk with us, send us a message, or you know who's answering that message? This guy is, so go and do that. Also, make sure you hit subscribe on that button on YouTube. That's right over there somewhere. Hit the like button as well, so these videos do better in the algorithm, because don't you want to see more of this stuff like this do better in the algorithm? Come on, you want to. So hit that like button. Also, if you're following on Spotify Podcast, iHeartRadio, or Amazon, hit that follow button or subscribe button. Any bit helps. So I want to thank you all for that. I truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, because it's what I love to do. So I really, really thank you for supporting. Also, thank you, Phoenix Fitness, for sponsoring this podcast. 20% use the code CP20 at FX.com. Thank you, Phoenix Fitness, description of the podcast. Thank you, Brendan, once again. Let's make this release the best one ever. Well, by the time this comes out, we'll be able to look back and then be like, hopefully Kevin was right. So on that note, that's usually guys. Thank you for listening to the Chord Progression Podcast. My name is Kevin, and you guys know how I end every single one. It's a big, healthy, and hearty. See ya! Yeah.